Nestled within the deep valleys and dense forests of the Appalachian Mountains lie stories as ancient as the rocks underpinning their steep slopes. Our tale begins in this isolated setting in McDowell County, West Virginia, around 1923, where generations of families remained cut off from the outside world for decades. At the end of a road that turned impassable in harsh winters stood a small log cabin, home to the Hollister family. Their isolation was so complete that for 4 or 5 months each year, they saw no one but themselves. This seclusion would set the stage for a tragedy spanning generations. The patriarch was Jeremiah Hollister, a tall, bony man with a thick beard and penetrating blue eyes. Widowed at 42, he raised his daughter Martha alone, a girl with delicate features. Martha's mother, Sarah, had died during a difficult childbirth when the girl was only 6. The baby boy did not survive either. From then on, father and daughter lived in isolation in that small cabin. The closest neighbors were nearly 10 kilometers away, and visits were rare. The pastor from the small church tried to visit once a year, usually in summer. He noticed Martha, now 14, seemed increasingly withdrawn, avoiding direct eye contact and keeping her arms crossed over her body. Jeremiah was always a strange man, says Ella Davis, now 93, one of the few still alive who knew the Hollisters. Even before Sarah's death, he rarely came down to town. It was Sarah who bought supplies, always in a hurry, always looking over her shoulder as if afraid someone might follow her. Local residents commented on the strange dynamic between father and daughter. On the rare occasions they appeared together at the village store. Martha seemed like a shadow, always a step behind her father, responding only in monosyllables when addressed. The winter of 1937 was particularly severe in the mountains. It was during this winter that Martha, then 20, became pregnant with her first child. When spring arrived, Martha didn't come down to town with her father. Rumors began when Jeremiah was seen buying baby clothes. "My daughter is expecting," was all he said, his face as impassive as the mountain rocks. Suspicions grew among the locals. Martha had not been seen with any man, and no one had climbed the mountain to court her. The community began to whisper increasingly dark theories. Dr. William Foster, the region's only doctor, was finally called to the Hollister cabin on a rainy night in June 1938. Martha was in labor, and complications had forced Jeremiah to seek help. What Dr. Foster found in that cabin would haunt him for life. Martha, pale and fragile, gave birth to a girl whose facial features immediately suggested consanguinity to the experienced doctor. The infant was born with characteristics typical of children from close kin relationships: heart defects, extra fingers, and a visibly underdeveloped jaw. She survived only 3 days. Martha never named the father, but the doctor's suspicions were recorded in his diary, along with the disturbing observation that Jeremiah seemed more devastated than a grandfather would expect. "He held her as if she were his own daughter," wrote the doctor. "He cried in a way that made me look away, as if witnessing something too intimate, too sacred in its perversity." In those isolated mountains where law rarely reached, it wasn't uncommon for families to intermarry. Cousins married cousins, uncles married nieces, all in an effort to keep land within the family. But even in this context, certain boundaries were respected. The relationship between father and daughter was a taboo few communities tolerated. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. Don't miss any shocking stories like this one that reveal the dark truths hidden in American families. Subscribe now to dive into humanity's darkest secrets. After the death of Martha's first daughter, a silence fell over the Hollister cabin. For almost a year, no one in town saw Martha. Jeremiah came down alone for supplies, avoiding conversation. In April 1939, Martha was pregnant a second time. The child, a boy named Elijah, was born at home with the help of a local midwife, Ida Mae Jenkins, called only at the last moment. That house had a strange smell, Ida Mae reported years later. Something that reminded me of a wounded animal, an odor of despair and resignation. And when I saw the baby, I understood why. The boy was born with visible deformities. His fingers were fused into a claw-like shape, and his eyes were different colors. One blue like Jeremiah's, the other brown like Martha's. More concerning was his abnormally large head, a sign of hydrocephalus. That boy won't survive the winter, Ida Mae told Jeremiah, who received the news with a nod. Surprisingly, Elijah survived not just that winter, but the next 5 years. He never learned more than a few disconnected words, and his movements were limited. Martha carried him everywhere, even when he grew too big. During these years, Martha became pregnant twice more. The third child, a girl named Ruth, had less visible deformities but clearly compromised mental development. The fourth, another boy, was stillborn in 1944 and buried in the small family cemetery behind the cabin. That family always had problems with babies who were stillborn or died early, explains local historian Harlan Thompson. Records show the Hollisters came to the mountains in the 1820s and since then married almost exclusively among cousins. This pattern created a concentration of problematic genes that manifested in increasingly severe ways. In 1945, tragedy struck again when 6-year-old Elijah succumbed to pneumonia during a harsh winter. At the funeral, neighbors noticed Martha, holding 4-year-old Ruth's hand, appeared to be pregnant again. Martha's fifth child was born in June 1946, a girl named Sarah after Martha's deceased mother. Unlike her siblings, Sarah appeared relatively healthy. Her eyes were a deep blue, nearly identical to Jeremiah's, and her early development seemed normal. Sarah's apparent normality changed Jeremiah's behavior. He began taking her to town, exhibiting her with a pride residents found disturbing. He treated her as if she were his own daughter, not his granddaughter, recalls Clementine Parker, who worked at the grocery store. He kept showing how smart she was, how quickly she learned. The resemblance between them was undeniable. Same eyes, same face shape. As Sarah grew, it became evident she had escaped the worst genetic consequences. At 5, she sporadically attended the local school in warmer months. Her teacher, Miss Abigail Wilson, noted that despite some learning difficulties, Sarah was considerably more advanced than Ruth. It was through Sarah that the outside world began to glimpse the true nature of life in the Hollister cabin. On a rainy autumn day in 1952, Sarah came to school with a visible bruise on her face. When questioned by Miss Wilson, the girl finally spoke. "Daddy got angry because Mommy didn't want to sleep in his bed anymore," she said with a child's disconcerting innocence. "He says Mommy is his, that she always has been since Grandma died." The Miss Wilson reported the incident to the local sheriff, John Buchanan. But with only a child's account as evidence, he was reluctant to intervene. "Those mountain families have their own customs," the sheriff said. "It's not our role to interfere unless there's a clear and immediate danger." The winter of 1952-1953 further isolated the cabin. When spring came, Martha was seen in town with Ruth and Sarah, appearing worn and older than her 36 years. Most alarming was Jeremiah's absence. It was only in July 1953, when a hunter got lost near the Hollister property, that the truth emerged. The hunter, Joseph Miller, reported seeing a recent grave in the family cemetery. A rudimentary headstone bore Jeremiah Hollister's name and the date January 12, 1953. "I thought it strange no one in town knew he had died," Miller told the sheriff. "But the strangest thing was what I saw through the cabin window. Martha was sitting at the table with the 2 girls, and she seemed happy. It was as if a weight had been lifted. The summer of 1953 brought changes. With Jeremiah's death, Martha found new freedom. She frequented town more, started a small garden, and let Sarah attend school regularly. Ruth, though limited, showed improved behavior. During this period, Martha met Jacob Wheeler, a middle-aged widower who had recently moved to the region. A carpenter seeking refuge after his wife's death, Jacob didn't heed the local rumors. "Everyone has a past," he would say. "What matters is the present and how we choose to live from here on." Their friendship grew from casual encounters at the store and conversations after church. For a woman who had lived under her father's oppressive control, Jacob's kindness was like water in the desert. In October 1953, Jacob asked to formally court Martha. The community reacted with shock and morbid curiosity. How could a decent man like Jacob be interested in a woman with Martha's past? But secrets in small communities rarely stay buried. One Sunday after church, Clementine Parker approached Jacob in the parking lot. "You know who those girls' father is, don't you?" she asked, her voice low and insinuating. Jacob, uncomfortable, replied he assumed it was Martha's deceased husband. Clementine let out a dry laugh. "Martha was never married, Jacob. Those girls, their father is the same man who was Martha's father. Jeremiah Hollister kept his own daughter. You understand what I'm saying? You're getting involved with a cursed family." The revelation hit Jacob like a physical blow. He drove aimlessly on winding mountain roads for hours. When he returned at night, he drove to the Hollister cabin. Martha sat on the porch as if waiting. "You found out, didn't you?" she asked, her voice calm and resigned. Jacob nodded, wordless. "I understand if you never want to see me again," Martha continued. "But before you go, I'd like you to hear my story." And so, under the Appalachian starry sky, Martha Hollister told her story, the abuse beginning shortly after her mother's death, her attempted escape at 14, after which Jeremiah chained her to the bed for weeks as punishment, the pregnancies over the years, bearing children who carried the genetic weight of that forbidden union. "I loved them, you know," she said, tears streaming silently. "Despite how they were conceived, despite the deformities, despite everything. They were my children. I just wanted to protect them, give them some chance." Jacob listened, his heart divided between horror and growing compassion. "And Jeremiah?" he finally asked. "How did he die?" Martha looked at the stars a long moment. "The winter was harsh," she finally said. "He got sick. Pneumonia, probably. He refused to go down the mountain to see the doctor. One day, he simply didn't wake up." There was an almost imperceptible hesitation that made Jacob wonder if he was hearing the whole truth. But who was he to judge? "On the day he died," Martha continued, "I felt like I could breathe for the first time in decades. It's terrible to say about your own father. I know, but it was as if a shadow had been lifted. Not just from me, but from the girls, too." Jacob took Martha's hands, a simple gesture that made her eyes fill with tears again. "No one should go through what you went through," he said. "No one." Then Sarah appeared at the door, her blue eyes, Jeremiah's eyes, wide in the darkness. "Mummy," she called, her voice small. Martha turned. "It's all right, dear. Mr. Wheeler and I are just talking. Go back to bed." Sarah hesitated, looking cautiously at Jacob before obeying. "She looks like him," Martha said softly. "Sometimes when I look at her, I see him looking back, and my heart freezes. But then she smiles or says something kind, and I remember she is not him. She is herself, despite everything." Have you ever wondered how many Marthas are hidden out there, suffering in silence, trapped in cycles of abuse that pass from generation to generation? Leave in the comments. Break the silence. To show we are attentive to these stories that need to be told. The following months brought an almost normal routine. Jacob visited regularly, helping with repairs and bringing small gifts. Martha transformed. The woman who once flinched at noises now occasionally smiled. Their relationship became the main topic of local gossip. "It's not natural," commented Abigail Simmons, a local matriarch. "A decent man like Jacob getting involved with, well, we all know what she is." "She didn't do anything," replied Elenina Davis. "She was a victim, not a perpetrator. And those girls are innocent." Meanwhile, in the cabin, Martha struggled with internal demons. Nightmares frequently woke her, sweaty and trembling. "Sometimes I think I see him," she confessed to Jacob, "in the corner of the room or at the forest's edge. I know it's not real, but it seems so." Jacob gently suggested she talk to someone. Martha resisted, fearing judgment, but when the nightmares affected her well-being, she agreed. Dr. Richard Montgomery, a psychiatrist visiting the larger town monthly, became an unexpected ally. A progressive man, he understood Martha's behavior was a natural response to years of abuse. With his support, Martha slowly began to process her trauma, a painful path with relapses and despair, but also small advances in hope. Meanwhile, Sarah, now 7, flourished in school. Her intelligence and fierce determination compensated for occasional difficulties. Ruth, though never fully independent, developed surprising skill in sewing and crafts. But as the girls grew, inevitable questions arose. Sarah began asking about her father. "Why don't I have a father like the other children?" she asked one night. Martha froze, her glass of water trembling. "Your grandfather Jeremiah took care of us after your father left," she finally said, choosing her words carefully. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it omitted the darker truth. "And where did my father go?" Sarah persisted. "He wasn't ready to be a father," Martha replied, feeling the words inadequate. Sarah, with a child's perspicacity, sensed there was more but learned not to press. In 1956, 3 years after Jeremiah's death, Jacob asked Martha to marry him during a picnic in a sunny clearing. Martha, taken by surprise, didn't respond immediately. "Are you sure?" she finally asked. "After all you know about me, about my past." Jacob took her hands. "I know you, Martha. Not just your past, but who you are now. A survivor. A mother who would do anything for her daughters. A woman with more strength than anyone I've ever known." Martha looked at him, tears in her eyes. "I don't know if I'll ever be normal. If I'll ever be a wife in the way you deserve." "I'm not asking you to be something you're not," Jacob replied gently. "I'm asking to build something together, at our own pace, in our own way." The wedding was a small ceremony in the cabin. Life as Mrs. Wheeler brought Martha a new sense of legitimacy. For Sarah and Ruth, Jacob became the patient, gentle father figure they never had. But the past has a way of resurfacing. In 1959, when Sarah was 13, the age Martha was when the abuse began, she found an old diary hidden in the attic. It was her mother's, begun after her grandmother's death. The yellowed pages held the raw truth, the nature of her birth, that her grandfather was also her father, the deaths of her older siblings, her mother's silent suffering. When Martha found Sarah on the bed, the diary open and tears on her face, she knew immediately. A chill spread through her, followed by a wave of nausea. "Is it true?" Sarah asked, her voice small and broken. "Grandpa Jeremiah was my father." Martha closed her eyes. When she opened them, her daughter still waited. "Yes," Martha finally said, the word a painful sigh. "Yes, it's true." The revelation shook the family. Sarah became withdrawn and silent, missing school for weeks. "I'm a freak," she told Martha. "Half my genes come from the same place. Is that why Ruth is the way she is? What's wrong with me that we haven't discovered yet?" Martha, devastated but determined to hide no more, explained everything. The genetic risks of consanguinity, why some children are more affected. That Sarah seemed to have escaped the worst physical consequences. But that doesn't mean I'm okay, Sarah argued. What if I have children someday? Will they inherit this contamination? Jacob suggested consulting a genetics specialist. Dr. Benjamin Rosen, known for pioneering work in human genetics at a Philadelphia university, agreed to see them. After examinations, he told Sarah, "You are not a freak, my dear. You are a young woman born in difficult circumstances, but that doesn't define who you are." He explained how genetics works, how recessive genes usually don't cause problems unless paired with similar genes from another parent. If you marry someone unrelated to your family, your children will probably be as healthy as any. The important thing is no connection to the Hollister lineage. The consultation marked a turning point. Sarah began to separate the truth of her origins from her personal identity. She wasn't just the daughter of incest, she was Sarah Wheeler's, having officially adopted Jacob's surname, a young woman with her own dreams. Life found a new balance. Ruth's quilts and tapestries gained recognition beyond the community. In 1962, 16-year-old Sarah met Michael Prescott, the son of a professor studying Appalachian culture. When Sarah told him her history, fearing rejection, he surprised her. "My father is Jewish," he said. "My grandparents escaped the pogroms in Russia. I know what it's like to carry the weight of family history, to be judged not for who you are, but for what people think you represent." Their romance flourished. When Sarah received a scholarship to study nursing at West Virginia University, Michael supported her. Martha watched with pride and amazement as her daughter charted a path she herself never could. In 1965, in her final year of nursing school, Sarah married Michael in a small university chapel ceremony. Martha, in a light blue outfit, never looked more radiant. That same year, Dr. Montgomery suggested Martha share her story anonymously to help professionals understand and help victims. After careful consideration with her family, Martha agreed. Her case, published under the pseudonym Patient H, became one of the most cited in emerging literature on trauma and resilience. In 1970, Ruth passed peacefully in her sleep at 29 from heart complications likely related to her genetics. She was surrounded by her creations, quilts and tapestries that told stories in fabric. Sarah, now a respected nurse and mother of 2 healthy children, Elizabeth and James, returned for the funeral. Martha, now 53, watched her grandchildren play in the clearing where she and Sarah had played. "They'll never know, will they?" she asked Sarah. "About Jeremiah, about everything." Sarah, her blue eyes softened by wisdom, replied, "One day, when they're older, I'll tell them a version. Enough to understand where we came from, what we overcame. I want them to know their grandmother's strength, how you broke a cycle that could have continued." Martha felt tears. "Do you think it's possible, really breaking the cycle after so many generations?" Sarah smiled, a smile of knowledge and hope. "Look at them, Mom. Look at me, at Michael, at you and Jacob. We've already broken it." In that moment, as the sun set behind the Appalachians, bathing the clearing in golden light, Martha Hollister Wheeler finally allowed herself to believe that perhaps the sins of the fathers need not be visited upon the children. That with love, courage, and truth, even the darkest stories could give way to new beginnings. The years passed. The mountains remained silent witnesses. The Hollister cabin, abandoned after Martha and Jacob's deaths in 1985, slowly returned to the earth. The family cemetery became a peaceful place visited by Sarah and her descendants.